Good day to you all. Good morning, afternoon, evening, whatever it is, wherever you are. And welcome to Talks on Tuesday, where we meet every Tuesday, not surprisingly, at 11 o'clock Pacific time. And you can also view us on Zoom later when we post the link. And if you do join us on Zoom, please remember to like, comment, subscribe, because the more the merrier and the more interesting the discussion. So, what was I going to say? Oh, today we are going to be talking about near-death experiences. I tend to think of them as just more out-of-body experiences that happen in an end-of-life situation. And Barb, what is it you call them?
NDEs, you mean?
Yeah, you used to call them like temporary
Oh,
death.
I would just call them temporary death experience because oftentimes people, not everybody, but oftentimes the people who reported them were found to be clinically dead. So I
Yeah.
thought a temporary death experience was actually a little bit more descriptive.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah.
Never caught on.
And
I think it should have.
well, maybe if more people would subscribe to our YouTube channel, um, well, it needs to get out there in the world. Um, but anyway, this is something I've been listening to, oh gosh, different conversations and lectures on YouTube. And you guys probably all know that there's a lot of research being done on this at the University of Virginia in their Department of Consciousness Studies, or Perceptual Studies, I guess it is. And that's where the department was started by Ian Stevenson in his studies of reincarnation, but it's being carried on by now many scientists, among whom Bruce Grayson is the one who focuses the most on the near-death experience. And his lectures on YouTube are fascinating. And he's written up histories of near-death experiences. There have been reports of near-death experience since ancient times, and they all seem to follow a pattern. They're not exactly the same, but there is a feeling of hope, buoyancy, happiness, a sensation of having come home again. Often people will see Christed level beings. And what's interesting is, even though a lot of people will say, oh, well, a lot of people expect there to be an afterlife, so that's what they see in this state. But a lot of Christians end up seeing Buddha or Krishna. um, and a lot of people in Asia will say, I saw Jesus, but I don't even know who Jesus is. And so there's this strange phenomenon, and the explanations tend to fall under people who explain it physically. Different chemicals in the body tend to activate as the body shuts down. Psychologically, because of expectations that we have of death. And the other is spiritual. And since this is Talks on Tuesday, we'll probably stick with spiritual, although Dr. Grayson's work focuses on people who are really clinically dead. They have flatlined, and yet they will report things that can be verified, that can only be witnessed with sight, hearing, taste, touch, the ability to process language. They will even see and report on things that happen outside the room where their body is that can be verified later. So it's really fascinating. And that's just a semi-short introduction, just for, I know there will be viewers on YouTube who maybe are just curious and haven't read all this stuff like probably you have. So I will just throw it open and see who wants to join us in this discussion.
Well, Mary, I thought you were going to bring up David R. Hawkins. Is that correct?
Yes.
David R. Hawkins?
I love him.
Yeah, I appreciate you actually introduced me to him, and I think he's right in alignment. But he talks about his initiation as a young kid with the NDE. And without going into detail, the interesting thread for me was the variations of near-death experiences, because he didn't define his as a near-death experience. I don't even think he identified it as a temporary death experience. He more identified it as some sort of karmic experience, where he had to answer the question, do you want to live? Do you still want to live? And I thought that was interesting. Also in that, I had a friend who did a psilocybin dosage, and what he described to me was exactly what David R. Hawkins described. It was some sort of variation on the theme, and he was asked to choose whether or not he wanted to stay.
Right.
And like David R. Hawkins, he chose yes because of his family. He could not leave his family.
Right.
And I enjoy the tangent. I know that's an extreme, temporary death experiences or near death experiences. They're extreme experiences. But what I like to contemplate, the invitation for me is, what does it look like for me to have near death experiences every day?
Oh, fascinating question.
And every day, I am always also asked to choose to live. So, yeah, I guess I'm just opening up that thread as well, if anybody ever goes there too, because I, in a selfish way, I haven't had that extreme experience. And so I try to make it about me. And I go, well, how can I relate to that? How does that apply to all of us? So that's where I go with it.
Well, what's interesting in bringing up Hawkins is that his experience and that of most NDE experiencers is that it is transcendent. It absolutely changes their life and how they look at this physical experience we have here, and they know that this is not where home is. It's just fascinating. Renee, you've got your hand up.
I do, because I do have firsthand experience in this realm, if you like to call it that. I've also had the honor and pleasure of working directly with a doctor whose name is Dr. Yvonne Cason, who during her nursing training, the plane that she was traveling through the Yukon, one of the engines conked out and they landed in a frozen lake, and she had to swim through the lake and get to the other side. And one of her books, one of 3 or 4 books that she's written, is called A Farther Shore. And she was my medical doctor after I was struck by a Jeep in 1999. And she liked to call these NDEs spiritually transformative experiences, because they are sort of encompassed in a category which does not necessarily mean that they tick off all the boxes, like going through a tunnel and seeing light, or meeting all of your relatives who are deceased along the way. I didn't experience any of that. I did experience an out-of-body experience. I was definitely separated from my body and observing what was unfolding at the same time as being the protagonist and being struck by the vehicle. So I had those 2 simultaneous experiences happening in real time at the same time. And also coming to a place which is really indescribable, where you are in a place of being supported and nurtured or suspended in this energy which is beyond anything you can imagine, or there are no words really to describe it. It is definitely ineffable. And all I knew is that even though I did refer to the being of Jesus Christ and oh my God, like a litany, as I was repeating that lying on the street, waiting for an ambulance to come, So I was kind of connecting with those two sources, but this presence that was so indescribable and so unconditionally loving that you're in a place which is totally safe, even though you're lying on the pavement and part of you is broken and your head has struck the pavement and you're alive, but so you're not dead clinically, but you are now entering this portal of transformation which began at that moment when you were struck, and your life is inextricably and forever changed, and you can never go back to that place of, feeling safe or taken care of in the old way. So all the old constructs that you think are what support you and nurture you all dissolve like a cracked shell. That's the best I can describe it. So
Well, for me, the wonderful thing about these experiences and reading about them, I haven't myself, is it changes the way you think about death, not just for yourself, but when you lose a loved one, you know that they are met and greeted by this loving force. It's like that old theatrical experiment where you fall backwards into the circle of trust and you're caught. Nobody is dropped when they fall backwards into death. So it's yes, Anka, Michaela.
Hello. I want to say that I had a near-death experience when I was a little baby, and I remember that um, I had something at pulmons, and I had to learn to breathe in a other way than I did before, and was like a voice that say to me that I should do this because I will have a great destiny to make in this life. And I was hearing something, but in my soul, like not in the ears. Um, and was at a level of understanding very high because the soul is the higher level of understanding, and it's that's how I received that experience with the near that I was hearing what others were thinking in that moment, and I choose to be alive and to breathe how I have to do the best for that moment. It's hard to understand this because it's when I was a baby, it's like I don't know, and other experience, but not like this. When I was at the SIA, my sister gave me her finger to not die and to go to her near the shore, and sister is near me now. And I don't know, was near death, but not like when I was baby. It was different. I was hearing in a with the ears, not with the soul. what I had to do. It was touching, like a touch, not really necessary to hear, but I say to her, "Give me your hand," and was very good to me. And then just that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, all of these people have survived death. But it sounds like these fall into two categories where they are told that it's not your time, you have to go back, or they have a choice. We can choose. That happened with my mother right after I was born, like within a week. She had a near-death experience and she had the choice. You can stay and raise your children, or you can be here. And apparently here was wonderful. But she decided to stay and raise her children. And
Yes, it's like a voice of the soul that
yeah.
you need that in that moment, like an angel voice that says to you what to do.
Mhm.
I'm starting to feel like there's almost a spectrum, kind of, I guess, what I started out with as I'm listening to the stories about again, the extreme experiences of being near death. But if there is such a thing as a spectrum, then any, I guess, sort of physical ailment or emotional discomfort, I'm just going to use the word discomfort. A near-death experience is extreme discomfort. There's an extreme choice to make. But if I have a headache or I broke my ankle, it's really not so different. I still am making a choice to live, but it's not as interesting because it's not as extreme. If I have a cold, I still made the choice to live. I recognize that truth seems to not be here. I feel like I'm not seeing the truth. But once I see it, the cold heals. So I'm starting to have a sense that there's this spectrum and there isn't sort of this, well, there's life and discomfort, but then there's near-death experiences, which are super special. But I feel like they're more on a spectrum. That's just kind of what was coming to me as I was listening to these very, very beautiful stories.
Yes, I would say that spectrum is the best way you can say, because it's like you say, it's different, and the spectrum is the key of the what I wanted to say.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, Barb.
Yeah, I like the way you phrase that, Durin. And in this, I think the late 70s, Raymond Moody wrote a book called Life After Life. And that was my first introduction to this concept. He interviewed a bunch of people. And I know there's a lot of other more recent material around it, but I think he also found that there was kind of a spectrum of what people experienced, but there were enough commonalities to make it seem like there was something valid to it. And from what I've heard, and I have not experienced one, but from what I've heard from people who have experienced them and then have had reconnective healing sessions, they've mentioned that they feel that reconnective healing is very close to what they've experienced during this kind of out of body or, kind of,
That
yeah,
that's
go ahead.
exactly what I was gonna say. No, as you were talking, I go, okay, is she gonna bring up what I've been thinking about, and so, yeah, exactly, that they can get there without having to have this horrible trauma, where they experience this beautiful, whatever it is that they experience. Generally, I've heard that, it's this beautiful experience, and that they can now access that by bathing in the frequencies, or living your life in the frequencies, that you can be there. It's that, I guess it's the glimpse, or the toggling that you can find yourself doing.
Right. Yeah. I find that when I'm experiencing a session, either facilitating or receiving, or just like lying there, just kind of being aware of it myself, just sitting on the couch or something, I find that I get information that I wouldn't have just again in my day-to-day life. I don't know if it's how it compares just from what I've heard. I don't know how it compares to something that, say, Renee or Anka went through, but I know that it takes me to a different realm that is, yeah, like you say, Julie, it could be a glimpse of that infinite. So, and it's a nice
Cecilia looks
reminder.
like she has something to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
Cecilia.
be- I,
Oh, sorry. I guess Anka for a minute and then Cecilia.
I think that frequencies are higher when you are um, in this spectrum of near-death experience.
I think I'd agree with you, but I don't think they are higher. I think the frequencies are the frequencies. But
Yes.
because of where we are, if we are near death, we experience them more fully, perhaps, or it what appears to be a greater power.
Yeah, the
Yes.
awareness maybe.
Where it is, Cecilia.
Mhm.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. This is beautiful. I love the shares and thank you, Renee and Anka, for sharing your knowing because you've been there. I feel like I did at one time. I think I mentioned a story where I flipped over a bike and hit my head and just had this huge swelling, but there was no pain. And I was like, the entire time I thought, I think I just died and chose to come back. And I think I was like, this is strange because the whole time I had this huge bump on my head. I never felt pain. And I was like, always very conscious and aware. But it was interesting because, and I love that you guys brought up the fact that you don't have to go through that to have the experience of that beautiful, beautiful knowing of the infinite. And it is the frequencies and it is, available to us in any moment. However, those moments that you got to live, that I think I lived as well, are very special and turning points, and they give you an opportunity to make new choices and realize that life continues and life goes on, and it's beautiful. And I just will reiterate the one story that I just absolutely love when I did go to that training program that was way before reconnective healing, but it was helped us to find our strength, the warrior within. And I went to, I lost consciousness, and I went to a place of a beautiful being that I meditate with, Mahavatar Babaji, and he told me, "You are eternal. Why are you pretending you can die?" And I was back in the place, and I was alive, and I was like, "I'm eternal. I can never die. I am eternal and I love you." And from that moment, I have not feared death because it's like, we just continue on. We just choose a different body. This time we're borrowing this thing right now and we just continue on. It's never, ever, ever over. And yeah, you can jump back into the same body if you want, but you can also choose another body next time. But we're never, ever, ever going to die. So it's just the best thing ever when you have that knowing. So I see you, Barbara. And I see you, Darren. Thank you. Go ahead.
Cecilia, I love your story about that. I guess it was something you signed up for, where people were putting pressure on you to die, basically.
Yeah.
And I love contemplating that. And kind of what came up for me a while ago, because you've shared the story many times, is I feel like that's what happens in life. Is it may be a family member or somebody else that you come across that puts pressure on you to think you're dying. Like energetic pressure. So you can either go and, I guess, sign up for something where someone can kind of put pressure on you to say, do you want to die? Are you going to die? For some of us, it's a family member, often a close family member. And I just thought that was the coolest contemplation. Like, yeah, that's just what happens when you come into life. you may have a near-death experience where you really feel that extreme pressure, but again, it's a spectrum. And you know, you had an extreme experience too. I had an extreme experience with my family. They had energetic, they just had this way of using their energy to put pressure on me to just give up. And it's just, it doesn't matter what it is, it's an experience, but the point is you chose the truth.
Yeah.
Barb.
Yeah.
Yeah, God, great discussion. And one of the things that I wanted to just mention is having these experiences helps us to realize that there's so much more than just what we see in the day to day. And I had an experience when I was young, and it wasn't like a near death experience, but it was an out of body experience where I was driving in the back seat of a car, and we drove by this house, and this old woman was out on her front stoop sweeping, and I suddenly ended up in her head. And we were all excited because the grandkids were coming that afternoon, and we had just cleaned the house, and sweeping was the last thing we had to do. And it, you know, it just lasted for a moment, but then it just gave me, it was just like, wow, you know, that's kind of interesting. And it helped me to realize that there's just more than what we just see. And you know, these experiences that you guys are talking about, and having a reconnective healing experience, or some of these others, like what you were talking about, Doreen, with your family, it helps us to open up the universe, I guess, or expand our understanding of where we are, and that we don't have to be so constrained, even though it feels like that on a regular basis.
This is such a great discussion. I feel as if we ought to continue this.
Oh my God.
Maybe next week, or you know, pick up on this topic again. Cecilia, did you have one more thing to say?
No, I'm good. I'm good. Okay, I will quickly share that I have been recently I've had several opportunities to participate in celebrations of life of family members and friends and dear ones and stuff, and it's been just so interesting, and I know that they're all still here because when I went to write down what I was going to say and share about them, these stories came out of places I don't even remember. It's like, oh my God, yeah, that's right, that happened. And it's like, so when I was writing about them, they were there to help me to find the right stories to share about them. It's like, oh my gosh, that's right. And I would write it down. It's like, thank you. It's like, they're here, they're with us always. So it's been interesting, beautiful.
They don't go away.
They don't go. They're here.
Well, we will see you all next week, possibly with a continuation or a deeper dive even, or something parallel, like Parallel Lives. I'm also the old lady on the porch. So see you all next week. Thank you so much. Love you all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everybody. Thanks.
Thank you.